Hey there. Thank you everyone who watched, liked, and commented on the last video. It really means a lot. Today we got a game where I feature en passant. My opponent opens in the most aggressive manner, e4, it's best by test according to Bobby Fischer, and I decide to go for my main opening, g6. My opponent develops a knight, just grabbing hold of these central squares that my bishop wants to fight for, and I go for it anyway. I got control of this long diagonal here, and my opponent strikes in the center with d4. They got the full center, but I'm going to chip away at it. c5. My opponent takes, because why not take a free pawn? So I give a check, and now I got my queen out early, which a lot of people don't like. They block with the pawn. I think better was to block with the knight. And I take the pawn. And now my opponent defends their pawn in the center. It's not too bad, but I just go for my favorite pawn structure. You don't usually have to move these pawns after they get into this structure. Sometimes you do. My opponent castles, gets that king pretty safe. And I decide, you know what, I gotta pin that knight to the queen. And my opponent decides to go back with the bishop. You know you're doing good when the opponent just goes back like that. So I develop my knight, defending my bishop, and targeting this pawn. So my opponent decides to attack my queen. I move my queen, though, because I saw it. And now my opponent defends the pawn. So they finish their development. They're doing alright. I decide to finish my development. And now they attack my bishop. But that's weakening the king a little bit, and I just go all the way back. So my opponent decides to attack my knight, but I'm not worried about that, so I just castle. Now my king's really safe. Like I said, this pawn structure, whew. So my opponent decides to defend that knight, and I was like, well, I'm not going to be taking that knight. I'm just going to take this free pawn that you left me. Now they take my knight, and I recapture with the pawn. I got a great pawn structure going on. My opponent really doesn't like my knight so close, so they decide, you know what, move that back or I'm going to take it. And I'm like, fair play, fair play. Now they want to go for this bishop, go for this square, and if I move my bishop, they take my rook. However, I know how to handle this. I just slide my rook over one. They follow through with their plan, trying to get my bishop, or trade it at least. And I'm like, no, buddy, we don't need any trades going on. And so they lash out on the king side, again, weakening their king. And I'm like, you know what? Someone's attacking on the flank, got a strike in the center. Now I'm threatening a fork between this knight and this bishop. My opponent sees it, so they move the knight. And I decide, I'm gaining a tempo. You gotta move that bishop or else I'm just gonna take it. So they slide back, and now I got a great center. It's kind of funny. White had the full center at the start, and I don't see any pawns in the center now. I wonder what happened. My opponent wants to lash out on the king side more. Luckily for my opponent, I have to lose some advantage here because there's a forced move on the board. En passant. My opponent takes with the rook, and I decide, you know what, I'm attacking that queen. I need some tempo, and my opponent takes. I get my rook all the way up into my opponent's grill. So they make a bishop and queen battery. However, it's pretty easy to stop. Slide my bishop up one. Now it's defending that pawn 3 times, and it's only attacked twice. So my opponent decides to triple stack. They got a huge battery on the f-file. However, I sufficiently defended that pawn. And I'm like, I'm just going to push a pawn, bud. See if I can break open that center a little more. My opponent blunders here. Better would be to go knight here. Captures, captures. This g-file is looking pretty dangerous. However, my opponent decides to blunder and just takes that pawn where I can easily take back. Now I got some breathing room for my king in case anything happens. And my opponent just fights on the king side some more. I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna be targeting that pawn there. I do your worst. So they do their worst. They move their pawn again, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll take a check. They have to slide their king out or block it. They can't even really block it though, because if they block with the queen, my rook would take, and if they block the rook, my rook would take. If the queen takes, then my other queen would take, or I guess my only queen. So I decided to pin the rook to the king. Not looking so good for my opponent here. They decide to take, because what else is there to do? And I take back just for some lulz. That rook just can't move, so they can't even give me a check. So they attack my queen. I slide over with check. My opponent blocks with the queen, which, I mean, they should have blocked with their bishop. However, with the queen, I can just slide my rook over. There's no saving that queen. Rook's pinned, and if the rook wasn't pinned, I could just take it. So they attack my rook. I take the queen, and they take my rook and resign. My plan was just to take that rook. They'd take. I'd threaten checkmate. They might block, and then I'd get a rook into the game. Thank you for watching, and if anyone's interested in chess lessons, message me on lichess. My username is SkillerEP. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.